All right. Well, once again, I want to welcome everybody to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. I'm David Stearns, co-CEO with Haley Marketing, and I'm joined by Susan, Brad, and Katie, who are coming to you less than a week after being in Miami for a really interesting, engaging, somewhat terrifying Staffing Industry Analyst Executive Forum. So what we're going to do over the course of the next hour, and we're going to actually try to keep this to an hour, but we won't, is to share as much of what we learned with you as we can. So we're going to give you the highlights of, what was it, about a 3-day event with just an incredible number of learning sessions. All right, so that's it. Here we go. So we're going to go through the keynote presentations. We're going to go through some of the sessions that we managed to attend, and we do our best to attend as many as possible. And then we'll wrap things up with just a few lessons each of us took out of this year's executive forum. All right, so I get to go first on the keynotes, and the executive forum always starts with an overview of what's going on in the staffing industry and how does SIA see the staffing industry. So for everybody listening in, if you've never been to an executive forum, it's a really cool event. I will say it's generally geared a little bit towards the larger staffing companies. So the perspective, it may be a little different from some of the people listening in today, but personally, I always think that you can gain a lot by knowing how the companies that are really driving the future of the industry, how they're thinking. So in this session, Barry Asen and Tim Lantos helped explain what's going on and started with some oh so cheerful news. Just how bad is the staffing industry right now? So you guys know the pain. Overall, the industry is down about 20% since its peak in 2022. There's been 640,000 temporary staffing jobs lost out of 3 million. And that's average daily employment in temporary staffing. That's pretty significant. And I know that's why it's been so hard to sell since the end of 2023. This one's probably the one that bothered me the most, is that the penetration rate, in other words, the percentage of the workforce employed in temporary roles, has fallen to 1.59%, which is the lowest it's been since pre-2009. So employers in 2024, and the data is through the end of 2024, are using less temporary workers as a percentage of their workforce than they have in 15 years. We got to work on changing that. The industrial staffing sector down 19%, so about the same as the industry average. But the big pain, and if you work in travel nursing, you know it better than anybody else, is the travel nursing segment, which had incredible meteoric rise in 2020, 2021, and part of 2022, but then has since come down 59%. So we're gonna have some more data later on about some of these trends, but that's, travel nursing has been the one that has been struggling the most. And I will say one of the slides that I know we're not going to have time to get to is actually an analysis of the healthcare staffing industry. So we're not going to get to cover it during our hour together, but I will tell you there's some bonus slides after the end of the presentation in the PowerPoint deck. You can get all of the slides and you'll be able to see this recording at lunchwithhaley.com in the on-demand webinars section of our website. All right. Oh, and I forgot, the clerical is down. So the thing that is, to me, the most interesting, not good news, but most interesting is, Barry said that if you looked at GDP growth over the same period of time, the industry should have grown 6% rather than declining 20%. And for the first time that SIA has been tracking this, the growth of the staffing industry was decoupled from the growth of the economy. And that's certainly concerning. So what was causing the disconnect? So what we learned is that in part, it's a pullback from unsustainable levels. There was so much temporary staffing being used in 2022. The entire industry was red hot, led by travel nursing and other travel healthcare staffing, that it had to pull back. It couldn't sustain where it was. So that pullback led to the decline. part of the unsustainability also is just the economy itself. We saw a transition to, with an election year and now political views aside, the uncertainty that's coming out of the current economic climate. Caution and uncertainty are not great for staffing because people don't make hiring decisions, because people put projects on hold because they keep capital on the sidelines and sitting in their bank accounts rather than deploying it. And that applies to both consumer spending and business spending, because when those two things are down, the economy slows down. And that means less demand for temps. This one I was not aware of, is that there's been actually a multi-year weakness in several industries. U.S. manufacturing has actually been, according to SIA, in a recession, negative growth the past 2 years. So if you're in light industrial staffing, you're seeing this firsthand. I think in construction staffing, we saw a lot of infrastructure projects that were making skilled trades do fairly well the last couple of years. Now this year, with the defunding of so many government projects, there's some question marks about that segment of the industry as well. This one was really interesting to me, is that there's been a general labor shortage. We've all felt it with 3.5% unemployment. And what's happened is companies, twofold. One you'll see on the next bullet, which I'll put up. It's made good people very hard to find. So when good people are hard to find, companies have preferred full-time employees over temps because they want reliable workers. So they'll actually overhire more than they normally would, and they won't use as much flexible or contingent staffing as they normally would. And it's also tied to the fact that they weren't using that much overtime. And when you compare regular time pay versus temporary labor is more expensive. So we have to be showing other ways that providing that temporary labor is helping to drive out costs to prove to the employer that what we're doing is actually economically advantageous. And the last one here is that there's been a real growth in alternatives to temporary staffing. Statement of work projects, people using online talent platforms, think of an Upwork type of model, but more and more big staffing companies are building platforms in segments beyond traditional IT and creative. And then direct sourcing, companies pulling things in-house, saying, we're going to manage our own temporary labor pool ourselves. So those three trends grew over the past 2 years to the detriment of the staffing industry. And of course, technology change. Now you're going to hear in multiple reviews, AI, 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 because everywhere we went was AI at this conference. But I just mentioned that it wasn't AI first, it was about staffing platforms. So the big international global staffing companies are putting in place platforms where people can go online through an app, put a job order in, request talent, basically disintermediate the need for the staffing company to be supporting the hiring process, because I can do it through an app. Just like you want to order an Uber, we're seeing it in industrial, we're seeing it in hospitality, seeing it in healthcare, and you're seeing grow in more and more industry segments. And if the big guys are there investing, it's going to push more employers away from traditional staffing relationships. And there's the AI. The AI from a sales standpoint is because our clients are using AI to reduce the number of employees they need. Less employment means less demand for temporary staffing and direct hire services. So we're just starting to see this, the very beginning of AI agents joining the workforce. I think somebody asked the question is, who's going to be this first staffing company with a workforce just of AI agents? I thought that was a really intriguing question. We're now seeing, this was a Workday, the ATS platform. They've built a recruiting agent that's increasing human recruiter capacity by 25%. So they're seeing a reduction in the number of people working in corporate HR departments, working in recruiting jobs. It's an interesting question for the staffing industry is, will we see the same change to less need for the same number of recruiters, or will an increase in recruiter productivity actually lead to more jobs going to staffing companies as we become more efficient? Call center demand. For those doing call centers, we're seeing more and more AI agents that are replacing human agents. So companies that are in the support center, customer success, industry are trying to find ways to use AI tools to do texting and voice-based customer service, which again is going to cut down on demand for staffing in the call center segment. BP, the companies, SIA talked about them. They've reduced their need for developers 70% by using AI for software development. So I wanted to show examples here of how AI is hitting HR, AI is hitting call centers, AI is hitting software development. And I can tell you from my world, AI is hitting marketing as well, as we're seeing digital and routine tasks are going to be the first things to be displaced by AI technology. And then the next layer, as these agents come into the market in 2025, 2026, and 2027, we're going to see more of the mid-level digital work, meaning knowledge work. The stuff that we do every day on a computer is going to be displaced by agents. And so as staffing companies, we have to think about, well, what jobs will that take away? And what new jobs will it create? And what tools and technology and training do we need to give our team to stay in front of these changes? Barry said that most jobs of the future are either going to be AI and or automation augmented. So we're going to live in a world that's complete human machine interaction all the time. All right, let's go to some better news. How do you compete and win in this kind of an economy? So one strategy is to become a technology first, AI powered marketplace. Now, if you're a small to mid-sized staffing organization, this is really hard to do. We heard that SIA Healthcare is spending $140 million a year on new technology development. I don't know about you, but I'm not keeping up with a $140 million investment. Now, there may be niche markets that I can compete in where I can bring technology, or I can buy really good third-party technology and integrate it into a stack to be using AI and automation with my recruiting team and my sales team to become incredibly efficient for the clients I serve. And that's related to the second strategy is, I can keep running a staffing company kind of like I've always run it by being super focused, really getting to micro niche markets that I can own because I understand certain industries, certain problems that employers are having, or certain talent markets. And I can win by having really deep relationships in those industries with those clients, with those types of candidates. A third strategy is to say, hey, we're just going to become a fulfillment partner to the big guys. They're going to go sell the VMS and MSP contracts, and then we're going to come in just as a fulfillment function, eliminate basically our sales cost. And when we get to the end of the presentations, you're going to hear about a couple of companies that did that to have astronomical growth. But if you can be the most efficient at filling the job orders that somebody else is getting, you can profitably work with the big players rather than compete against them. Another idea is to move up the value chain. You see this diagram that's on there. This is the total talent management diagram that SIA has been showing us for years and years and years. And they brought it up again this year to say, hey, the gold circle in the middle, this is what traditional staffing companies do: temporary staffing, place and search. But all those other pies around the middle, those are other HR, employment, workforce solutions related functions. And as staffing companies, we may have to look at how we expand in different directions to move up and deliver more value to our clients. Related to that is several companies we saw talk about adding more statement of work and project solutions. I'm not sure what workmation is, other than David made a typo. I think it's workforce automation that I made a brand new word out of. But the idea is we have to think about how we're going to take responsibility for outcomes for our clients, for actually running functions, running departments, owning the deliverables. And then the second last thing in here is to, can you look at industries that are less impacted by AI and automation? In 2025, yeah, there's still a ton of opportunity. 2026, 2027, probably the same. When you start getting further out, you look at the advances that are happening in AI and robotics, it's going to be hard to find an industry that's not impacted by AI and automation. And so you absolutely need a 2 to 3 year strategy of where will we be as our clients change to become more AI and automation integrated. And then the last thing that we heard Barry and Tim talk about is the need for staffing companies to be omnichannel in marketing and recruiting. And of course, we were cheering because we're marketers. But what they said is the ability to get to clients, the ability to get to candidates has become more fragmented and more difficult than ever. And to succeed and win in this kind of environment, you need to be everywhere, and everywhere that your ideal clients are, everywhere that your ideal candidates are. So that means I'm on the talent and the staffing platforms as a recruiting source. I'm automating job spend management to make the most out of the limited resources I want to put into my recruiting investment, to make the most out of the job advertising. I'm using social media in very intelligent ways to build our brand, to engage with the right kinds of employers and job seekers, to reduce our dependence on job boards. I'm using direct messaging and email marketing to build relationships, to communicate with people the way they want to be communicated with. I mean, it's one of the ironies is we have more ways to communicate and reach people than ever before, and it's harder than ever before because it's so disjointed in terms of what we can use. So now I need to know how clients prefer to be contacted and use those tools and channels. Our websites, we need to be thinking about how do we maximize what's happening on our website so that every person who's hitting the website, we're maximizing the probability they take an action. We're getting them to apply to jobs. We're getting them to contact you about staffing services. And last but not least is the old school stuff. It's networking. How do we build stronger networks? Because no matter how technology driven staffing becomes, still a people business, and people are going to depend on referrals and reputation, relationships, and networking is still how you do this even in 2025. So the last piece of advice from Barry and Tim was really just the big question is, how will your company evolve? So just give some thought to what changes will we make? Looking at the fact that, yeah, the economy might be a little weaker this year than we want it to be. We're not going to see a sudden rebound. I think Barry said staffing is just, it's not going back to what it was. It's fundamentally changing. So how will you look to fundamentally change your sales, your recruiting, your service delivery to adapt to what your clients and your candidates want? All right, guys, I know you all said I was going to be the longest on that, and you were right. But that is the biggest presentation of SIA. So now let's move on to one of the other keynotes. And Susan, you're going to talk to us about Marcy Rozel's discussion.
All right, thanks, David. Okay, this keynote, as David said, was presented by economist Dr. Marcy Rozel. And as we were walking into the session, I turned to Brad and said, "This is my idea of hell." As I was walking out, I thought, if my Econ 101 professor was as entertaining and as engaging as Dr. Rozel, I probably would have gotten a much better grade. So her first points were there's a disconnect between economic reality versus perception. And the economy has seen significant growth over the past 25 years, but consumer sentiment still remains low. The disconnect between economic data and public perception is driven by inflation concerns, media coverage, and housing affordability, despite low unemployment, strong GDP, and lower interest rates than 25 years ago. She stressed multiple times the importance of not reacting to a recency effect and looking back at the past 25 years. And over the last 25 years, the economy has grown substantially. Global GDP has tripled, and GDP per person in the US has nearly doubled. In short, the world as a whole is wealthier than ever before. We currently are experiencing low unemployment and strong growth. The current 4.2% unemployment rate matches that of the year 2000, showing a stable labor market. Inflation perceptions linger even after this stabilization. While inflation has returned to normal levels, the effects of past price spikes do linger in consumer perceptions. Consumer confidence has declined steadily. Despite economic indicators, sentiment has worsened since its peak in 2000. She made the point that the public reacts stronger to food prices going up than they do to the unemployment rate rising. Next, the labor market shifts and future challenges. So labor markets are permanently tightening. The US is experiencing an aging workforce with 4 million people reaching retirement age annually and birth rates low. The long-term trend of labor scarcity will continue to shape the economy. Labor hoarding is shaping employer strategies. Businesses are reluctant to lay off workers due to the difficulty of rehiring in a tight labor market. She also pointed out that recessions are rare and driven by unexpected events. Only 2 recessions have occurred in the past 25 years, both caused by major unforeseen disruptions, the financial crisis and COVID-19. She stressed that recessions happen as a result of large, and she stresses over and over, unexpected disruptions. The current economic situation isn't unexpected, and it's really about how quickly can the economy adjust to the new reality. She feels that we're currently in a wait and see phase and said, as an economist, she can smell smoke, but isn't ready to pull the fire alarm yet. So what is the impact of AI? AI will shift, but not eliminate jobs, and you're going to hear that multiple times throughout these presentations. AI adoption will increase efficiency, but it's unlikely to cause widespread job losses in service industries. And the service sector demand is infinite. Unlike manufacturing, AI-driven industries like healthcare, education, and consulting will see rising demand as costs decrease for those services due to the efficiencies that AI brings. All right, so next up we have Katie.
Thanks, Susan. So the keynote speaker that I attended was about the accountability advantage by Sam Silverstein. He opened up his keynote presentation by asking the audience, who are you accountable to and who are you accountable for? And asked the question amongst the entire audience. And a lot of people said for who are you accountable to, these people would shape your decisions and impact your life, such as clients, you're trusting you with their needs. Your boss, they're relying on your performance. Family, they're depending on you for your support. So who are you accountable to is someone, they are responsible for some aspect of your well-being. They affect your life beyond the service level. Then who are you accountable for? People said in the audience, your team, they're looking for guidance and leadership. Your kids, they depend on you for growth and support. Yourself, you're ensuring your own personal and professional development. So accountable for is you're responsible for some aspect of another individual's well-being. You affect their life beyond the service level. Then he talked about accountability. And accountability is keeping your commitments to people. It's not just about the tasks, it's about the mindset and not just about an action. You're responsible for tasks, but accountable to people. So that's key, that you're responsible for the task of something and you're accountable to the people. And the big thing is that you don't let people down. True accountability flourishes when people can count on you. Keeping your word reinforces relationships and leadership credibility. Then leading individuals to be their potential best. So empowering those around you. Your success is tied to the success of those around you. Great leaders will lift up others. Knowing that you have a strong team to lead individuals will help with your growth. The next thing is accountability is it's all of us. It's that collective strength. In challenging times, we stand together and that fosters resilience and success. And a strong workplace culture drives accountability, it boosts productivity, and it strengthens brand reputation. Now I'm going to turn it over to Susan to talk about our sessions.
Thanks, Katie. So this next session, Dawn McCartney and Peter Reagan were the presenters, and both of whom are with SIA, but in previous positions have extensive experience as a buyer of enterprise staffing and selling enterprise staffing. And they were both in agreement that you need to sell solutions, not just staffing services. Enterprise buyers aren't looking for traditional staffing services anymore. They want solutions to workforce problems. And small to mid-sized staffing firms can compete by being agile, strategic, and offering value beyond just filling job orders. Dawn said that when she was with McDonald's, she liked having smaller staffing companies in her pool of suppliers because when something out of the norm came up, those were the suppliers who could react quickly and provide the solution without needing to go through a lot of red tape. Enterprise buyers are well informed. Many have experience in staffing themselves. And they also recommended to ensure your online presence is strong. Enterprise buyers will Google your company before engaging, and they will also go through your application process, as candidate experience is very important to them. And then next, do your homework before reaching out. Understand the company's structure, challenges, and needs, and be prepared for a marathon, not a sprint. Enterprise sales is a longer sales cycle. Make sure you have continuity and outreach when salespeople leave your company and that the follow-up doesn't drop off. Then next, they talked about buyer personas. There are 4 key personas in the buying process, and keep in mind that a single person could be more than one of these. So first, there's the enabler. This is an internal person who is well respected and does have a voice. Then the legislators. These are usually people in procurement or legal. They set the requirements but don't decide, even though they will lead you to believe that they do have the final decision. And next, the adopters. These are the people who will use your product and service and will be impacted by the decision. They will influence the decision and need to see the value of your product or service. And then finally, the decider. This is the person who gives the final yes or no, even if they aren't involved in every discussion you have. And of course, approach and communications need to be customized based on the persona itself. And then the final piece of advice was you are a reflection of the decider. Don't assume because you're on the provider list that that means you will get more business. You need to earn it. And now I will be passing it off to Brad.
Thanks, Susan. This next session was really data packed. It was great. I loved it. And they looked at what opportunities AI, automation, and tech are going to create in the staffing industry and what impact it has so far. So they started off by looking at AI impacting different job categories. And to start, I'll pull in the categories that are going to be most impacted. We looked at office admin, 57% higher potential for automation. We're seeing a lot of those entry-level positions shift to automation. Sales was 49% and finance was 45%. So if these 3 areas make up a good portion of your business, there's a few things that you can do. You can look to shift to other areas, but probably more beneficial, you can look to climb the value chain. So those entry-level positions, those lower-level positions are the ones that are ripe for automation. So really take a look at your business mix and think about what you can do to climb the value chain. Then we've heard a few times already that statement of work is growing. So in these areas, you might have to shift and present how you're going to work slightly differently. Now, on the flip side, there were several areas that were or had a lower potential for automation. Some of them are not surprising. So you look at like farming, fishing, 8% potential for automation, building maintenance, 8%, and construction, only 15% potential for automation. So these are areas that may not be impacted by AI and might have strong potential moving forward. And then they looked and evaluated companies that are replacing their contingent staff with AI and automation. And that was a big theme. You're seeing that large enterprise worldwide organizations are looking at actually replacing contingent staff with AI and automation. And when David presented Barry's statistics, you can see that here. Employers with 100,000 plus employees have said 32% are replacing contingent workers with automation. We're seeing less use of contingent work in those companies. The next tier down, 10,000 to 100,000, only 16% were replacing contingent workers with automation. And then the final tier, those employers under 10,000, 0%. Now, I'm sure there are some that are, but in terms of statistic relevance, 0% were focused on replacing contingent staff. So there might be an opportunity for the small and medium-sized organizations to play a role here in getting those employers staffed and prepared for the future. Now, the next area looked at what AI skills are in demand. So if you're in the tech space, if you're in the AI space, or if you're looking for areas of growth coming, this was some great data. They looked at machine learning. They've seen a 20.2% increase. Apache Spark, 12.5% increase. Job openings mentioning artificial intelligence growing by 11.5, and then deep learning was growing by 3.75, and within that there was TensorFlow and computer vision. So very specific niche focuses and an opportunity for staffing companies out there. Then also playing into it, they looked at the US aging population and how this is creating an opportunity. We have a massive shift in consumer needs coming, and that's shifting over to healthcare. And more specifically, they're looking at home health and personal aids. And the data that they shared is that that area of home health and personal aids is expected to grow by over 820,000 through 2033. So big opportunity there. And then the last point and the last recommendation was look for niches within niches within niches. So look for ways to be a very specific specialist. It's going to help you differentiate and find a market. And then also consider the statement of work side of things. You saw with those large employers, the use of contingent labor is starting to drop and it's shifting to other areas, whether it's platform-based or statement of work. Now I'll pass it over to Katie.
Thanks, Brad. So the next session that I attended was about AI across your organization. They talked about AI adoption in staffing. And one statistic that I found was interesting is that 52% of staffing firms are experimenting with AI, but only 15% of those have actually made investments in it. So it's quite interesting that if 52% are experimenting, they haven't fully committed into it. Firms that are embracing the AI and automation are seeing improvements in efficiency and revenue. Firms that have done the digital transformation stages are 57% more likely to have revenue growth. And those that have done the automation, they have increased productivity by 36%. So it's working pretty well. Then the benefits of AI in staffing. There are 5 key benefits for AI. They improve personalized outreach. So you can automate customized emails and messages to make communication more engaging with candidates. They have a faster response time and better job matches. So the AI-powered chatbots are providing instant responses to candidate inquiries. They're using their algorithms to pair candidates with jobs based on the skill and experience. And then third, they're more efficient at administrative tasks like onboarding. They're streamlining and automating even the resume screening and interviewing schedules for candidates. And the fourth is they have enhanced candidate screening. So they're pre-screening the resumes of candidates for that better fit. So taking the time out for that. And then faster job placements. AI is accelerating that time to hire and reducing it. So it's getting candidates in the door quicker. Then they talked about the difference between AI assistants and AI agents. So AI assistants, they really help the recruiters complete tasks more efficiently. They rely on human interaction to initiate those tasks. Some examples of those are chatbots like ChatGPT, Google Assist. They can handle the scheduling, answering questions, searching for information. And then the other difference is the AI agents. They automate the entire workflow, reducing the recruiter workload. They can work more autonomous. They can operate with very little or no user input. Some examples of that are self-driving cars, AI-powered customer support agents. So you're going to hear a lot more about AI, I'm sure, in the rest of our talks and the sessions, but now I'm going to turn it over to Brad.
Yeah, and great segue because we will talk more about AI. And this was a great session that was held by Butler Street. The team there does an absolutely fantastic job every year. They talked about leading a high-performance sales organization. And one of the fears from sales is boy, AI is going to come in and replace me. And they shared some interesting data. So they mentioned not to think of it as AI or artificial intelligence. Think of it as augmented intelligence. And that augmentation can help your sales team be more effective and productive. They looked at the percentage of sales teams that saw growth last year. Those using AI, 83% of them saw growth. On the flip side, those not using AI, only 66% experienced growth. So by using AI, we're seeing much better results on that side. And the fear here is that, boy, AI is going to replace us. But that was actually the opposite of what they found. They said the percentage of sales teams that increased their headcount in 2024 was grown, the headcount grew when teams were using AI. So those using AI saw a 68% of them actually increased their headcount. Those not using AI, only 47% increased headcount. So sales teams are more productive, do more volume, have better outcomes, and are growing overall. And why is that? Well, they shared a statistic about sales not selling. So overall, globally, when you look at salespeople, 70% of their time is spent on non-revenue generating activities. These are low volume activities like prospecting, data cleansing, that type of thing, not selling, administrative work, while only 30% of their time is spent selling. So when Butler Street comes in and consults, they help on that sales process. And then they talked a lot about digital sales labor. So how can we flip those percentages? So instead of 70% on non-revenue generating, let's spend 70% of that time selling and only 30% on the non-revenue. And some things that you can look to do with a digital sales labor force or AI or augmented intelligence, things like lead qualification, your research, coming up with scripts, call planning, objection handling, chat bots, meeting summaries, even writing and producing the proposals after call or after a meeting. And then they also demoed their sales training AI, where you can go through and before a call, chat with AI as it's the customer so that you can prepare your sales team, improve your approach, handle objections that might come up. And they do this consistently. Okay, they call it role practice instead of role playing. So if you're struggling with any of these things, definitely reach out to Butler Street. They have a great program to help in those areas. And
Yeah,
with
Brad, I was
that,
at another conference and I heard one of the guys from Butler Street say that every person in the organization actually has to, I'm going to call it compete, but sell against the AI agent every day just to practice. And they assign the AI agent the role of different types of staffing buyers, or in their case, different types of staffing company executives might be buying their services. And everyone gets to do that practice. But it's nice because they're doing practice in the comfort of their own home. And it's not quite as hard as doing it on stage in front of a group of people. But then they share the results of where they're successful and where they're not. And of course, the AI can summarize everything that went on so that they can learn and sales managers can learn.
yeah, for sure. And they said that right off the bat, people were concerned about that, nervous, but you get over that so quick and you realize that the AI is helping hone your skills and helping you put more money in your pocket and the company. All right, Katie, you are up next again.
All right. So the session I attended here was on LinkedIn, from LinkedIn. It was leveraging their economic graph amidst the labor market shifts. So we had an economics from one of the guys at LinkedIn. They talked about the state of the staffing and search and how they felt the global economy was expected to avoid a recession this year. Their information that they are seeing is that we're expected to avoid it because the real GDP growth is projected at 3.1% this year. So there's a growth there. So that's why their numbers are telling them we're going to avoid a recession for the global economy. LinkedIn data also suggests that the economy is remaining stable, but hiring is slower. And they get that based on the feeds that are coming in and what people are posting on LinkedIn and what they're saying about it. They saw from all the comments that there was recession concerns talking between July of 2022 and April of 2023, but those have since subsided. Lately, they have more posts that are talking about layoffs. They saw those increase in early in 2024, and they expect those discussions to continue through 2025. But overall, the job growth remains strong, but temporary and contract-based work is declining, which is signaling a shift in workforce dynamics. So workforce evolution is the next discussion they talked about, and about how unemployment is set to peak and participation is set to erode. With the labor force, participation is declining as more people are leaving the workforce. People are living longer, but they're retiring earlier. And one statistic that I found that was quite fascinating was that nearly 8 people are retiring per minute in 2025. So it just goes to show how the workforce is starting to get older, with 8 people retiring. Then there's also a demand for flexible work, which is exceeding the supply. So flexible work is outpacing the supply by 60% of applications on Indeed are for remote and hybrid roles, while only 20% of job postings are offering that flexibility on LinkedIn. Skill sets are changing, and they are set to change even more in the next 5 years due to AI. AI is accelerating the pace in which we need to change our skill sets and the way that we need to look at jobs and who we're hiring for those positions. But there's also still a component with the human soft skills. And then we need to marry the AI with soft skills. So we still need that relationship building, communication, problem solving, a business acumen that come from the soft skills that we cannot get from the AI. And then the next session that I attended was more about AI. Brad touched a little bit about it in his session that he saw, which was AI augmented and not AI only. So AI is a powerful tool. It can qualify candidates by assessing their skills. It can make the hiring process faster and more efficient. However, we still need recruiters because they need to build relationships, handle complex negotiations, and ensure a strong cultural fit within the organization. So again, we don't need to rely only on AI, but we need to incorporate it to make us a little bit more efficient. Then they talked about voice AI in interviews, how they've tested AI-driven interviews and how it's still evolving. But most candidates prefer human interaction currently during the hiring process, but they think in the next 5 years that that's going to change as well. Candidates are though saying that they feel less pressure when they are on a voice interview. They can lead to a little bit more natural responses than when they're talking to a human. Then they talked about AI and job advertising. This has really surged with one-click apply for applications, which is making it harder for recruiters to manually review every candidate, which is another reason bringing AI to review the candidates that are coming in because of all of the applications from the one-click applies. AI is helping to quickly filter that short list and provide the most relevant applications and streamline that hiring process. Candidates are also using AI to build their resumes, and employers are using it to sort through the applications. So they're able to weed through them a little bit faster. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brad.
And
Thanks.
Brad, before you jump to the next one, just if I can add a comment to this one, I was talking with a couple of CEOs who are using AI-based voice interview tools, and they noted that the average talk time of a job seeker with the AI recruiter is twice as long as the talk time with the human recruiter. So they may like the people, but they have deeper conversations with the robot. It's kind of, I found absolutely fascinating. I would have expected it to be just the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, that extends to chatbots too. So I saw a statistic that Gen Z will spend 16 minutes more with a chatbot than they would with a live human. So it's amazing how technology is changing the way we interface. All right. I had the opportunity to facilitate one of the networking roundtables, and the topic was on building a high-performing sales organization. So we had a great collection of people from all different industries, sizes of organization. And I started off by just asking the table to go around and talk about their biggest challenges right now, not just a challenge like having trouble finding candidates or, hey, I'm having a trouble selling. I wanted them to get specific. So some of the challenges that people were facing right now, I'm sure are akin to the challenges that you're facing right now. So driving the right activities and the right volume of activities from your sales team. Looking at compensation models with a base that's too high. There was a big discussion around what your comp models were for your sales or business development team. A lot of people were struggling or having a inability to land that first appointment. And then finally, hiring and retaining the right salespeople. There's been a lot of churn over the last year. So the discussion on each of those items, and I'll boil it down here. First, driving the right sales activities and volume. There was a great discussion around how you recognize and reward the right activities. So I loved this recommendation. It was assigning a made up value to sales activities. So one organization preaches, let's reach for a $20,000 week. And that might not sound like it doesn't mean what it really sounds, but what they did is they broke down different sales activities into a monetary value. So they might say that enriching data or finding a prospect might be worth $100. That's $100 sales activity. Then actually making a call, making a connection or a drop by and being able to talk with somebody to verify that they're a buyer of staffing services, that might be worth $1,000. Actually having an appointment and producing a proposal might be worth $10,000. And getting that order and securing that and actually filling that position might be worth $20,000. So the whole premise here is to get people away from doing those menial admin tasks and get them to elevate into focusing on those higher level tasks and getting to that $20,000 week every single week, and in turn, driving more revenue. The next was revisiting the base and bonus structure. And the talk was really around disincentivizing performance. So coming out of COVID, a lot of people changed their comp model, increased base, and disincentivized performance. So salespeople are sitting there, they're fat and happy. Some were giving away cars, some were giving away stipends, some base was as high as what they were earning pre-COVID with incentives. So they really suggested revisiting that base and bonus structure and making sure that you're not disincentivizing performance. Next was getting that first appointment, and the conversation really focused around getting niche. So if you're out there selling just general staffing services, very hard to get that first appointment. You need some point of differentiation, some point of specialization. And last but not least, hiring and retaining the right salespeople. There was a lot of talk about the focus on hiring former college athletes, those that are very well structured, that are dedicated, that had to work for everything that they got, that had to manage multiple priorities between sports and school, that were performance driven. And there was agreement around the table that those oftentimes were some of their highest performing salespeople. And it didn't start with just sports or athletics. It was also tied to the arts, tied to music, tied to other extracurriculars where people excelled not just academically, but in managing the other responsibilities that they had coming out of school. So that was our table.
Brad, and look at, I actually went to a session. So although at every event, you plan to go to see all the sessions, and all of a sudden meetings you didn't plan on pop up. So that was all a good thing. But when I did get to attend is got to sit down and listen to a bunch of executives who grew their staffing companies from startup beyond $100 million. And they really, told the tale of how they did it. So just going to share some of the take-home strategies. One of the people on the panel said, when you're expanding into new geographic markets or new states that you're going to do business in, really important to understand the local employment regulations so that you know what to do and how to engage with particularly the HR departments that you're going to now be selling to. Another talked about really being very strategic about how you build your brand. You may be very well known in the market or markets where you're currently doing business, but in that new community, that new city, state, you're a complete unknown. And, unless you're a giant global company, you probably have little to no brand recognition in that market. But you need to think of the brand two ways. How do we want to be seen by employers? And how do we want to be seen by job seekers? What's our employment brand? So as Brad was saying, that niche, it's, really thinking about how much you can focus so that you can stand out as you're introducing yourself to new clients and candidates. Likewise, have a strategy. How are you going to break into the market? Are we following a client into that market? Are we going to do it through mergers and acquisitions? Almost all the companies that got beyond $100 million, at some point, M&A become part of their strategy. Or are we going to do organic growth and, open a branch and hit the ground running? In terms of driving growth, to the point I just made, the bigger you get, the more you need really good strategic thinking, because to move the needle when you're at $1 million isn't that much new business. To move the needle when you're at $100 million means I need to really be thinking about bringing in new accounts, bigger accounts. I may need to think about how we change our service delivery model to handle those larger accounts. You really need to focus at what you're exceptional at. These companies that grew didn't grow by being everything to everybody. They got more focused on their greatest strengths and then doubled down to get even better in areas where they were already strong going in. They also found that they needed to level up their team. There's an expression that as your business grows, half your people and half your processes can't keep up. And to a T, every one of the people on this panel said we had to learn, and it was not easy, when to let go, what to let go of, and who to let go of. You also had to focus on the right partners. Now, one of the people on the panel, he built his business around selling to MSPs, and he viewed them as a partner in his growth, not as a blocker, not as an adversary, but really as someone that he treated as a customer. And he worked on figuring out, how do we best serve our MSP partner? Because if we're successful with them, we're going to grow greatly. And they did. On the branch growth, a couple of the people on the panel had grown branches rather aggressively. And what they said is, if you're going to have a branch network operation that you're trying to grow city to city to city, you have to always be mentally in startup mode. So no matter how big you get, you have to remain aggressive, super efficient, and very KPI focused to make sure those branches are doing the right things to successfully get off the ground. And then everybody said, look at it. They actually didn't use the word AI in this panel. I'm shocked. They just talked about automation, though, and really trying to maximize efficiency. And the bigger you grow, the more that automation supports continuity in your service, a better client and candidate experience, and cost savings. And it's not about chasing every shiny piece of technology, but it's figuring out, what does your customer really want, your candidate really want, and what will they use? All right, Brad, looks like you're up next.
Yeah, and that was a good transition, David. And this plays into the session that Katie was talking about earlier. This was presented by Converse AI, which is a vendor to the staffing industry. They have a great platform. And they talked about virtual recruiters for staffing. And what I liked about this session is they didn't just talk about their product. They had a client come in and share their specific experience and data with using Converse AI over the last year. And what they found, the client was Talent Burst, and they leveraged Converse AI for AI recruiters in the IT, commercial staffing, healthcare, and life sciences space. And throughout the year, they had almost 500,000 touch points with candidates, so reached out to that many candidates. They worked almost 22,000 jobs, and they found that 27% of all placements came from the AI recruiting agent. And the average time to submit went from almost 3 days down to 1.29 days. You can imagine on the MSP VMS side of things, speed is currency. So reducing that drove a lot of revenue for the organization. And then they went on to find that 14% of all the placements they made were completely hands off without the use of a human. So the way that that process would really work is the rec was entered into the ATS. There was automated skill matching that immediately went on. There was immediate and automatic omni-channel candidate outreach. So that was SMS, that was calls, that was email, that was chat. That helped with data enrichment too, and keeping candidate profiles current, but then weeding out the people that simply weren't qualified and not saying, hey, sorry, you're not qualified for this position, but rerouting them to other positions that might be relevant. And then only the top interested candidates were delivered directly to the recruiter right before submittal. So that was 14% of all of their placements. So really, really powerful in reducing the need for a recruiter to do all that admin work. And then the next session was AI use cases for staffing productivity. And started off, this was Lauren Jones. She started off by talking about adoption of AI in the staffing industry. And at last year's session, they did some research and said 48% of companies were using AI in early 2024. Another 48% said that they were going to immediately. Fast forward to today, a year later, and we're still only at 54% using AI. So we still have an advantage here for companies that are embracing and using AI. You have a competitive advantage, but it's not going to be there forever. When you look at automation, when you look at AI, omni-channel is crucial. Gen X is going to gravitate towards email. Millennials love text. Gen Z will talk with a bot. I mentioned this earlier. Talk with about 16 minutes longer than with a human. But you can see the differences here in how people engage and interact. You need to make sure that your automations and your AI is omni-channel. You're hitting people on the platform that they really engage in. And then I want to encourage you to use the free tools and technology that is out there. We have some free marketing GPTs that were created through ChatGPT where you can create buyer personas, messaging, pain points, do content strategy, do social content, do email outreach. And we put these out for free. So the QR code that's on the screen right now, if you scan that or afterwards download the slides at lunchwithhaley.com, you can get access to all these free GPTs to make your internal marketing team that much more effective and efficient. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Susan.
Thanks, Brad. Okay, this next session was a panel of attorneys with specialization in employment law. And I was thinking to myself, I must be a glutton for punishment because I always seem to choose the legal session to attend, and taking a session with complex legal discussions and boiling it down to 3 bullet points is always a bit of a challenge, but here we go. So they were all in agreement that a well-crafted arbitration agreement is essential for staffing companies. Arbitration agreements are a critical tool to mitigate employment-related risks, particularly class action lawsuits. These agreements should be standalone documents, not buried in a whole bunch of other onboarding paperwork, and signed by both the employer and employee and written in a clear and enforceable manner. Courts assess arbitration agreements based on fairness. And they pointed out also that arbitration over the years has gotten almost as costly as litigation. And with arbitration, there isn't an option for appeal. Next, the legal environment around non-competes and non-solicitation agreements is shifting. And there was a lot of discussion and a lot of question and answers on this topic. With states implementing stricter regulations or outright bans, employers need to focus on protecting client relationships and confidential information rather than broadly restricting employees from working in their field. A well-crafted non-solicitation agreement can be more effective than a non-compete in protecting overall business interests, and the enforceability of these agreements varies by state. One panelist's advice was rather than litigate, take the money and invest. Reduce your bill rates, spend money on marketing. I did like that piece of advice, and go out there and get new clients. And then finally, the deportation issue. This population is about 8 million people in the workforce, representing 5% of the US workforce. With the number of people who retired, and you've heard this in previous sessions, and will be retiring, and a low birth rate, the labor shortage is going to get worse. But this also provides an opportunity for staffing companies. And there's a lot of fear around ICE raids. Currently, no ICE raids, which are judicial warrants, have taken place, but an estimated 100 are planned. 12,000 to 15,000 notice of inspections, which are administrative warrants, are planned. And their advice was to educate yourself on the difference. Judicial warrants must be honored, while administrative warrants have limited authority and don't grant ICE full access to private areas or employee questioning. And you can request an extension on deliverables on these. And now I'm going to hand it over to David.
All right, and I think we're at the end of the hour, and we're actually at our last session that we're going to cover, and then we're just going to wrap up with some of our takeaways, which will be really quick. But this one were 3 case studies. I'm just going to highlight 3 companies had incredible growth. Artec, 6 million in 1999 to 900 million in 2024. So their growth strategy was from day one, focusing on enterprise clients and then mergers and acquisitions. From a sales strategy, They did a lot of networking. They got good at responding to RFPs, and they focused on MSPs. And again, another company, this wasn't the only one, that said, we're going to grow by figuring out how to be really good at delivery and not worrying about having to sell, because we're going to go to the people doing the selling, the MSPs. How did this company grow? Well, they were committed to growth. It was the mindset of the leadership team from day one. They were committed to talent. They felt that you can't buy talent, you have to develop it from within, and that was a recurring theme amongst these companies. They had a strategic focus on enterprise account growth. They would land in an enterprise client, and it took them a long time to win one, but that one client took them from 40 million to 250 million in less than 2 years' time. One client. They had an operational model, which is around centralizing everything that can be centralized, which is mostly their recruiting and back office, and then localizing what needs to be local, their sales activities. And on the financial management side, they advise that make sure you don't outspend your growth so that you're in cash flow troubles all along the way, so that if any crisis hits, you put your business at risk. This company was always very prudent about financial management. The best advice the CEO received was, in the race for revenue, don't forget that profitability is the true compass for growth. It's not the size of the earnings, but the strength of the profit that propels you forward. So that may not be how tech companies work, where it's growth for growth's sake, but in staffing, it's about profitable growth. And our second company was in the healthcare industry, Host Healthcare, $3 million in 2013 to $771 million in 2022. And then to 450 million in 2023. Their growth strategy was mostly organic growth to a point, then M&A to take them to the next level, and then they just exploded thanks to COVID, which wasn't really a growth strategy, but they did benefit from it in 2020 through 2022. How did they grow? Their keys to success: psychological safety for their employees, having a great culture, and giving people belief that they belong, and most importantly, the confidence to try new things and experiment. They really focused on hiring, ensuring organizational clarity, and delegating responsibilities so leaders could focus on growing the organization. They made decisions using data, avoiding living on gut feeling and intuition, because they found that that didn't serve them that well. They implemented a process called scaling up. So you can read that book by Vern Harnish. It's about setting very clear objective, quarterly priorities, themes for implementation, regular meeting cadences. It's a great process for those of you who may use EOS. EOS actually came from scaling up. And then it's building a leadership team based on trust and mutual accountability, so that leaders can count on one another to get their priorities done, so everybody that's on the leadership team can focus on what they need to own. And our last case study was Alku, who seems to be a good case study almost every year, which went from being founded in 2008 to $500 million last year, all in technology staffing. Their growth strategy has been mostly organic till they got to a certain size, then M&A, and then they also had some COVID benefits. Keys to success, though, here very different. Alku has been focused on the success of their employees. They are very adamant about hiring entry-level people and then being really, really good at people development. I remember the CEO saying last year, and he repeated this year, he goes, I don't know anything about growing a business, but I know a lot about growing people. And when I make a commitment to my people and I show them that I care, they will do great things. So it's providing people with the tools and the training they need to succeed. It's having leaders who are focused on the success of their people, even more so than their own success. They do something very controversial in training. They take their highest performing salespeople and make them trainers. And what they found is that those people could generate 8.5 times more revenue from the team they would manage than they were ever managing with their own personal production. They got really good at new client acquisition because they focus on a very specific type of customer and a very specific type of talent. And they wholeheartedly admit, we're not a best place to work for most people, and that's just fine. But for the people who fit our culture, we're the best in the world. And I really like that message, because I think sometimes when you see best places to work contests, there's a pressure to just offer the world's greatest benefit programs. And really, it's about creating a culture that is great for the kinds of employees that you want to have on your team that fit the organization you're trying to build. Whew. Okay, that's it. Hey, we did it. We're only 4 minutes over, and I know we're over, but that's still a record. And really embarrassing for everybody listening. I just realized that I was on a panel and I forgot to write up notes for that. So I'll have to put that into our weekly newsletter. If you're not subscribed to Smart Ideas Weekly, subscribe and you'll hear all about maximizing marketing ROI, which was my panel. All right, but let's go on to lessons learned. So Brad, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, thanks, David. So, first lesson, the large players are shifting over to statement of work. There's higher valuations, better margins, less commoditization. So, as a medium to small size staffing organization, you may want to look at gravitating towards that area. Then, AI integration can help reduce friction and time to service. You saw it in the recruiting examples and several of the other panels that we covered. Look for ways to reduce friction so that you can get to submittal quicker, faster. And then automate those non-revenue generating sales activities. Look for tools, technology, process, AI to flip that so that 70% of the time is spent on sales and only 30 on admin tasks. And then identify and find a niche. Find something that you excel in, exploit it, and that's going to help you differentiate.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. All right, Susan, what you got?
All right, so my takeaways. The landscape of the staffing industry is changing and won't go back to how it was. Only staffing companies who are willing to change and reinvent themselves will survive. Next one, AI, it's off to the future we go, and you're very welcome for planting that song in your head for the rest of the day. AI is changing the industry and the world. It needs to be embraced as an opportunity, not a threat. And finally, the person who designed the acoustics in the Fontainebleau lobby bar is an evil person. If you've ever tried to have a conversation in this bar, you know what I'm talking about. All right, Katie, what were your takeaways?
Well, I agree on the bar. So definitely the acoustics are awful. My first takeaway is that workforce trends are evolving. The labor market is shifting with the increased demand for flexible work, the aging workforce with retirements, changing skill requirements due to AI, and a rise in contingent work. So recruiters need to play a crucial role than ever in navigating these challenges. AI is a tool, it's not a replacement. While AI is enhancing efficiency in recruitment, candidates and recruiters still value the human interaction, particularly in interviews, negotiations, and decision-making processes. And recruitment technology is evolving. AI-powered job advertising, voice AI in interviews, and automation in candidate sourcing are streamlining the hiring process. But human insight still remains critical. David?
All right, let me wrap it up. This is our final slide. My takeaways. You saw it in the presentation. AI is everywhere. If you don't have a plan, if you're amongst the 46% that Brad said that are not using AI right now, you need a plan. You need it now. You don't have to do everything. It's as easy as just going to ChatGPT and starting to talk to it, but you need to start creating an AI integration plan because while AI won't replace the staffing industry, won't replace recruiters, if you don't level up your game, it's going to replace the low value activities and financially you won't be able to compete. The industry itself appears to be fundamentally changing. It's going to be much more technological. It's going to be more driven by MSPs and people that are managing the client relationship and where they don't want you to have as many direct relationships. It's going to be more driven by statement of work and staffing companies that do more than just traditional temporary help and direct hire placement. So where in the world of total talent management will you compete? Big companies think differently, and that creates opportunities for the small ones. It's important to know what the global companies are doing in this industry. You're not going to outspend them. You're not going to beat them in size and scope, but you can beat them in service. You can beat them in relationships. You can beat them in customer experience. You just need to think about that question that's in the middle there. Where will you compete? And then lastly, the industry has become more strategic than ever. You really need to be thinking about what's our growth strategy going to be? What's our sales strategy, our recruiting strategy, and our marketing strategy? Sales, recruiting, and marketing are now all core functions in the staffing industry. And we want to think about what are the best ways to figure out who we're going after, how we're going to service those clients, how we're going to sell to them, and how we're going to find the talent they need. And with that, I want to thank everybody for Oh, I lied. I had one more. But I do want to thank everybody for being part of today's Lunch with Haley. But I repeated the one, and I forgot that I had this on here, that the omni-channel approach. You saw it in a slide I had earlier. You saw it in a slide that Brad had. Are you doing everything you need to do so your ideal clients and candidates see you as a company that is everywhere? All right, now I have the last one. If there are questions, I know we went fast at the end. Please feel free to reach out. This is a lot of information, a lot to take in. And if you're just wondering about what do we do with it, we're always happy to help. We've got a great team of marketing consultants and strategists who would be more than happy to chat with you about ideas for your business. Specifically on the sales front, if you're not already getting our 30 ideas to increase staffing sales in 30 days, this is a really cool limited run email campaign that you can use that QR code or get the slides when you download them and go there, sign up, and we literally send one sales idea a day, something that you can do to help drive revenue every day for a month. Get your whole sales team to sign up and then compare notes. It will definitely help you grow your sales. And last is we also have some special offers. So if you're looking to get some great savings and you need some marketing support, there's another QR code here I'm going to recommend. Again, if you got your phone out, take a picture. If not, take it from the slides, but we've got some incredible discounts. Our best deals of 2025 are going on right now, but they're ending soon. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. There's a quick plug for the podcast, Listening to Secrets of Staffing Success. And the only other one here is we have a really cool webinar coming up in just a few weeks. We've got a great panel. It's going to be me, Dan Morey, Mark Winter, and Tom Erb as we debate with one another about demand generation. And in this market, can you create demand for staffing services? So you're not just trying to steal business from the competition, you're creating new opportunity. It should be a lot of fun. And I'm sure there should be some good discussions / arguments that we get into during the next Lunch with Haley. So for all of us from Haley Marketing, thank you so much for joining us for today's Lunch with Haley Extended Edition, our Staffing Industry Analysts Executive Forum recap. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody again next month at our next Lunch with Haley event. Take care, everyone.